Going to tell you a little secret that this week on Tuesday it is Father Bowman's birthday, and so why don't we give him a big hand? So we made a decision that we would celebrate his birthday last night, and it was the Feast of the Archangels, so we came up with a whole dinner menu about Father Bowman's birthday. So there he is. You can see looking very happy. Almost looked like he was photoshopped in that picture, but it is actually him, and he gave permission to use this particular picture today. But in honor of the Archangels, we came up with a menu to honor Gabriel, Raphael, and also Michael. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we have here. This was the menu. It was written up actually, and it says the Archangel Gabriel announces, because Gabriel was a messenger, so sent a message of what we were going to eat. Besides the Garden of God salad and the Garden of Olives vinaigrette dressing, imitation of Olive Garden, we had Archangel Michael, or St. Michael's chicken. Now you might wonder, well, what is St. Michael's chicken? Well, St. Michael's chicken, remember he slayed the dragon. So it was a chicken breast with a toothpick and 3 peas piercing it down there. So a little bit of religious humor. We had Archangel hair pasta with garlic and oil, Father Bowman's choice. In honor of St. Raphael, we had little rolls that were cut out like fish. A lot of work went into this actually, and a staff, because Raphael was known to be the healer, and he took the guts of the fish actually and smeared it on someone's eyes in the book of Tobit, and the person was able to see. So that's about Raphael. He's also the patron of good meetings. So if you are ever in a meeting and it's very painful, start praying to St. Raphael for it to end quickly. So that's what he was known for. But then, of course, into every meal and really in our lives, who else always inserts themselves? The devil, of course. So for the cake, and you can't really see it there, it was a brownie cake. But it wasn't just normal brownie cake, it was a special brownie cake. It was almost like eating the batter of the brownie. It was fantastic, I have to tell you. So good that we ate more than half of it, probably. We had the sisters over as well. We ate more than half of it. And then afterward, there was a little bit left. And we're standing around in the kitchen, and I just kept going over to it. And you know what you do? You just keep taking little slices, just a little bit here, a little bit there, because it doesn't look like you're eating any of it then. It's like, oh, I'm not eating, I'm not having another piece, I'm just having 10 small pieces with it. So someone said, well, Father Stephen, why don't you just take the brownies back to your room, what's left, and you can eat them there and just enjoy all of them. It was very tempting to be able to think about that. And then I thought about it. I said, well, it probably wouldn't be the best thing for me to eat all of those brownies, because what would it do for me? It would keep me up half the night from the sugar, and I'd wake up with a headache, and it would be kind of gluttonous, and we don't want to be gluttonous with the brownies, of course. So I only took about half of what was left, and I went to my room. Today in our readings, we hear about really temptation. Jesus is addressing temptation, and he talks about 2 types of temptations that we have to be very careful of, and our actions towards those temptations. One is the temptation that we bring upon ourselves, and that is when we have something in our life that knocks on the door and always looks really, really good, but we want to make sure we don't fall into it. We have to be careful. So maybe your temptation, a great temptation, is the internet. Maybe it's shopping on the internet. Maybe it's going to sites that are not good for your soul. And remember, the eyes are the window into the soul. So what you let in there through the eyes, it can be very damaging, and it's very hurtful to God when we bring that into ourselves, into our own temple. Remember, it's up to us to make sure we protect our temple, what God gave to us. Maybe our temptation has to do with a bad relationship, and we know that it's codependent or it's not a good relationship, but we're afraid to shake the dust off our feet and move on. Maybe our temptation is watching too much Netflix or Hulu or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Maybe for our younger people, it's video games. And they spend way, way too much time on these games like Fortnite, I think it's called, and all these other ones. Apparently, it's like way too much. It's consuming people. We have to be very careful of that. Those are all things that can be harmful to ourselves. So Jesus gives us very practical advice. He says, if your arm is a problem, cut it off. If your eyes are a problem, pluck them out. If your feet are a problem, well, same thing. Just, we have to set boundaries. And I've said this before about good boundaries make for good relationships, including relationships with ourselves. And for the good of our soul, we need some boundaries. Like my boundary last night was only take half the brownies, not all of them. But we have to be careful, and we have to say, what is my limit? And sometimes that is painful. So this advice is very severe, but so is sin. And the sin that we fall into can be very damaging. Can be very damaging to ourselves and also to others. And so there's different levels of that sin, and we can ask ourselves, why am I tempted into this? What level is it? Is it to just satisfy my own earthly desires, my hunger, my desires for relationship, whatever it might be, desires looking for beauty, whatever it might be. We might not know exactly what it is, but there's different levels. There's some levels that are really deep that we need to be able to try to fill, and so we fill it with sinful things instead of filling it with God's holy presence. The second kind of temptation is that which we fall into that causes scandal to others. And he says this in the gospel. Jesus said, I do not go and harm the little ones. Do not go and harm the little ones. So he talks about how do we scandalize others. And there's public scandal, there's private scandal. But we have to remember that our actions have consequences to other people. And it draws them into it, and then they also get hurt. We've heard a lot about that at many different levels in recent weeks, in institutions, church, government. It seems like there's a lot of scandal. We really need to call upon the intercession of St. Michael, who was the defender in battle. And we'll say his prayer at the announcement time, actually, today, in honor of the archangels. But this subject of temptation is something we deal with as human beings. We have to realize, how do we control it? What is it that we fall into, and what is it that we can set a boundary with? Because God wants only the best for us. God does not want us to sin. He does not want us to fall into darkness. But unfortunately, there's that pull. The devil can be very enticing and very strong. And we have to really first and foremost admit that there is evil in the world, in our world too. How do we name that? And do we say, Lord, protect me from it? St. Ignatius of Loyola had a very beautiful spiritual exercises. We do the long retreat here and sacred stories and different programs that are based upon the exercises of St. Ignatius. And in one of his exercises, it's a very practical thing to do to help us with our sinfulness so that we don't harm ourselves or that we harm others through scandal. And that is, he invites us and says, sit with the Lord in a colloquy. Colloquy is a dialogue between, in this case, the person and God. But sit down, sit in front of the crucifix or at home if you have a cross, and sit and have a good, solid conversation with God and ask 3 questions. And I think this is a really good litmus test for us when we are looking to fall into temptations, when we need to improve our lives, and when we know that we allow too much sin in. Any sin is too much, but when it becomes even more harmful at a very deep level. He said, in your questioning and in your conversation with God, ask yourself, what have I done for Christ? What have I done for Christ? What am I doing for Christ? What am I doing in my life for Christ? And what ought I do, or what more could I do for Christ? And in a conversation, in a colloquy, it's not just us speaking, because so often that's all we do is babble with God. And we just keep talking, but we don't stop and listen. So in this spiritual exercise, a great gift from St. Ignatius, sit in front of the cross and start thinking about sinfulness in your life. What are your temptations? And always see it through the lens of Christ. Because maybe then and only then can you have the grace and the strength to overcome those temptations. Remember, what have I done for Christ? What am I doing for Christ? What should I do for Christ? Then and only then, when we answer those questions and hear what God is telling us, will we be able to see that we have a bright future that's not burdened and laden with the darkness of sin, but rather one where we can be a saint one day, holy, in unity with God in heaven.